There could be up to 100 billion barrels of oil in the ground under the south coast of England. That's according to an exploration company which says the discovery in the Weald Basin is probably the largest onshore oil find for 30 years. But they're warning it's likely that only a fraction of the oil can be recovered. Well, oil in the south of England isn't completely unheard of, with sites such as Palmer's Wood already in operation. The new site, found at Horse Hill, is close to Gatwick Airport. Other onshore oil fields include Herriard in New Hampshire and Storrington in West Sussex. Our business correspondent John Moylan has this report.
It's some of the most beautiful countryside in Britain, but take a closer look. That's a pump and it's producing oil. There are several sites like this in southern England, and there could be a lot more oil too.
Down there last year, a company drilled one of the deepest wells onshore in Britain for the past 30 years. Now it believes it's made a discovery which will change our view of the amount of oil right across this region forever.
The well was drilled to about 8,000 feet.
Steve Sanderson is an industry veteran. He's been involved with many oil and gas discoveries, but this even surprised him.
I think we've found a very significant discovery here, probably the largest in the last 30 years, and we think it has national significance.
Last year, the British Geological Survey said there might be over 4 billion barrels of oil in the south of England. Based on what they found here, the company believes there could be up to 100 billion barrels, although only a fraction of that may be recovered. To put all that into context, we've pulled 45 billion barrels out of the North Sea in the past 40 years. But oil exploration isn't popular in these parts, as Quadrilla found out when it drilled in Balcombe in West Sussex. Back at Horse Hill, the company insists there will be no fracking, but some aren't convinced.
Well, they've claimed they're going to have conventionally extracted oil, which there's a few sites around here, and they're quite small scale, but they've also been drilling deeper to the layers where you would need to use fracking, which is a much more dangerous process.
So how much oil is really down there? Professor Al Fraser is currently studying the region.
We're coming up with numbers of about 40 billion barrels as resources. These are resources, that's oil in the ground. We still have to get it out, and that's the next problem.
It's far from clear how much oil this discovery will ever produce, and getting local people on board will also be challenging. John Moylan, BBC News, at Horse Hill in Surrey.
Well, with me now is David Aron. He's the Managing Director of Petroleum Development Consultants. It's good to have you in. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
This is exciting news, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it's a very interesting development.
Yeah, I mean, and you've been involved with some of the fields that have been discovered in the past, Palmer's Wood and Horse Hill. I mean, how does this compare to those?
Well, the big one, of course, is Wych Farm, and that was developed in a very environmentally sensitive area. Palmer's Wood was developed actually very near to this current discovery. So, and very few people are aware of it. So it just shows you can develop, if you spend the money, you can develop oil fields even in very built-up areas. Because
inevitably there are going to be concerns about the environment and so on and so forth.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that the oil industry has realised is if there are going to be oil developments in these sort of areas, they're going to have to spend the money, and that's what we did at Wych Farm. We spent a lot of money to make sure the development was acceptable, and it won an environmental prize. I mean, it cost a lot of money, but that's part of the arrangements. That's what you have to do.
Okay, there's a lot of oil down there, it seems, but for some reason we can only get to a little bit of it, apparently.
Well, there's a question about whether there's a lot of oil, because what you actually have is a small pinprick. You've got one well in a very large area, the whole of the Wessex Weald. So what they've done is they extrapolate and say, well, if there was the same amount of oil in this particular well, in that whole area, there would be a large volume of oil.
Is it fair to make that extrapolation?
Well, people do. It's the way that exploration starts. But actually, you really don't know what's going to happen and what there is until you start to drill wells, and you have to test the wells.
And you've got to
so
test the wells.
It's early days. It's early days.
Okay, but 100 billion barrels is the suggestion. You're saying that in fact that might not be the case.
No, I think what I'm saying is it is an estimate that you can make. that if the whole of the area had similar geological characteristics as this well, this is the sort of number that you would come to. But what you don't know is how much of that can actually be produced, and that's why the well has to be tested. And so that's the plan. The plan is for the wells to be tested, or the well to be tested later this year. And depending on the results of that, if that's a successful test and oil can be produced, can come to the surface, then you'll drill appraisal wells, which will give you some idea of the extent in that particular reservoir, in that particular field. There are likely to be other fields.
Oh, indeed. So that testing is very critical then later on this year. But as I say, the suggestion is that, you know, while there might be billions of barrels out there, getting at it is difficult.
Yes, it is, because the rock, I mean, the quality of the rock, for example, in North Sea oil fields is very, very high. So recovery factors as a consequence in the North Sea are very, very high. As the fields become or are poorer quality and have poorer quality rock, then the recovery factor goes down. We don't know what the recovery factor is. It will depend on understanding the well test, and actually it will really depend on long term. Long term you'll start to have an idea of what this type of reservoir, because it is a new reservoir that hasn't actually been looked at before, and that's what's exciting about it. They've already discovered a field which they know about already, a horizon that they know about already, but in this case it's a new horizon.
Sure.
And that's what's exciting.
Virgin territory. Okay, David, it's good to see you, David Aron there, from a Petroleum Development Consultants. Thank you.
Thanks.